Right, here we go. Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's good to see you. I've got a great show. We got a lot to talk about, as usual. Of course, there's never a dull moment here in the Middle East, and a lot of it usually has to do with people trying to kill each other, unfortunately. So we're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about who the good guys are, who the bad guys are, what happened in Gaza, what happened in Syria, and Lebanon and everywhere else tonight. So stick around. Make sure you go over to the chat, please. And I want you to put in where you're watching from. So go in and just type in your location. I'd love to see that. And also, while you're at it, make sure you hit the like button and make sure you're subscribed to the podcast. Now, I'm going to be taking questions, but what we're doing is we have a little different idea now. What we do is we take the questions, we put them in a list, and then the last 15 minutes or so of the live, I'll go down that list and answer all your questions. So don't get frustrated if I don't get to your question in time. I will get to all the questions. We've got our mods copying and pasting them into this document that I can see so that I don't miss any, because there's so many, so many of you chatting in the chat box there that I can't get to everything. Before we go into our topic for tonight, I just would like to say thank you to our sponsor for this video. It's Hey everybody, do you ever hit the pillow at night and your brain just refuses to turn off? That happens to me all the time. I'm just like laying there going, oh my goodness, the monkeys and the dogs and all the things I have to do and all the things I didn't do, and it drives me crazy. So if you're like that, running through everything from headlines to tomorrow's to-do list, before you know it, it's 2 a.m. and you're still wide awake. A lot of people are in that boat. Constant noise, constant stress, and it catches up with you mentally and physically. And that's where my friends at Beam come in with their new product called Dream. It's a nighttime drink mix, kind of like hot chocolate. It's made with ingredients like magnesium and L-theanine and reishi mushrooms, stuff that actually supports real recovery. No sugar and no weird after effects. You just mix it up about 30 minutes before you go to bed, and it helps your body kind of naturally unwind. It's not in a drugged up kind of way, but just in a calm, steady way that helps you fall asleep faster, stay asleep, and wake up clear-headed. It's not a magic fix, but for a lot of people, it's made a big difference. If you're running on fumes and your sleep could use a reset, this might be worth trying. Use code HOTZONE to get up to 35% off at the link below. Better sleep starts with actually getting to sleep, and this will help. So check it out. Thank you to our sponsors. All right. Thank you to our sponsor. And now that we got that out of the way, I just received an urgent message on one of the WhatsApp groups that I follow, and I'm just going to read it to you here. Emergency appeal from the National Hospital in al-Sweida. Suwayda is the southern Syrian Druze village that has been attacked by government forces and Bedouin militias over the last several days. We're going to get to all the shenanigans that have been going on down there, and it's a lot. But this is an emergency appeal from the National Hospital there. Information remains limited due to the ongoing total blackout of electricity and telecommunications in the city. The National Hospital in al-Sweida has issued an urgent humanitarian appeal. The facility is now completely non-operational. Over 150 bodies remain inside the hospital, and there's no capacity to accommodate additional fatalities or casualties. All dialysis units and life-sustaining medical devices have ceased functioning due to the power loss. The hospital is unable to admit or treat wounded individuals, patients in critical condition, or emergency cases. Medical staff are working under extreme conditions, facing a total depletion of essential medicines, medical consumables, and basic emergency supplies. The hospital administration urgently calls for immediate intervention to ensure restoration of electricity, establishment of safe humanitarian corridors to allow the delivery of medical aid and access for emergency response teams, emergency fuel supplies to power intensive care units, surgical theaters, and life support systems, provision of essential medical supplies, particularly for patients with chronic illnesses and acute conditions, guarantees for the safety and protection of the medical and paramedical personnel while performing their duties, respectful handling, identification, and burial of deceased persons in accordance with humanitarian standards and local practices. The humanitarian situation is deteriorating rapidly. Every hour of inaction increases the risk of preventable deaths. We call on all relevant international bodies, humanitarian organizations, and emergency relief agencies, including the International Committee of the Red Cross and the International Federation of Red Crescent Societies, to intervene without delay. Whew. Well, we saw some pretty terrible videos coming out that showed where some of the militias that had taken over part of Suwayda had actually made it to the hospital, taken over the hospital, gone in and had executed everybody in the hospital, patients and medical personnel alike. The 150 bodies they're talking about, many of those were actually some of the medical personnel that were in the hospital when they took it over. So these people, to call them animals would be to do a disservice to animals. Barbarians is more like it. And there are lots of barbarians in this world. And sometimes I wonder if, all of us have that barbarian just a little bit under the surface, and just the right set of circumstances could bring it to the surface, because we see that happen in mob violence all around the globe, whether it's at an Antifa rally or a Black Lives Matter protest or something like this. Now, the brutality was so bad as the Bedouin militias, backed by the government forces of Syria, had moved into Sweida. Now they've retreated, they've been pushed out, and they lost badly. But now the Druze themselves are saying, you know what? It's time for some payback. And so the Bedouin are so afraid that the Druze are going to come in and start to massacre them. And there has been a little bit of that, I believe, that many people are just fleeing. They're packing up and fleeing completely. And so I'm going to read you some more messages that have been put out by some of the leadership about that. So first of all, I want to show you what the strikes looked like last night. This is insane. Al Jazeera was actually, filming the defense ministry building, which is like their Pentagon in Syria, in downtown Damascus. They were actually using that as a backdrop for their live shots, and Israel absolutely hammered that building while they were live on the air. So I'm going to show you that now. Oh, wait, wrong one. Well, that actually is it. Oh, I have to go back and see if I can change that. The footage is insane, like just off the charts. Like they hit it with probably, I want to say 15, 7 or 8 bombs at least. Where did that go? Let's see here. Okay. Oh, here it is. All right, I'll put this in there. Here goes. Take a look at this.
Bombing, guys. New bombing. New bombing, guys. New bombing. The building is completely destroyed.
Right off that thing.
New bombing, guys. bombing. Get us out quickly. Quickly.
So you can, I put out a condensed version of this live already, and it's on my YouTube channel. So if you don't have time to watch for an hour, you can go watch that one. And it's only like 10 minutes or so. But you can see that video in there as well. It's crazy, absolutely crazy. Now, I got a chance this morning to interview Mansour Ashkar. And Mansour is a Bedouin from Israel. I'm sorry, Bedouin. He's an Israeli Druze who's now living in Germany. And he's a former IDF officer in the Special Forces, a very intelligent guy and a very, very well spoken. And he gave a great explanation of why Israel decided to strike so hard on Syria. I mean, they actually tried to decapitate the government, really, or at least give Syria the impression that they could if they wanted to. So let's listen to Mansour and listen to what he had to say.
Yeah, tell me you're declaring a war about another country without saying war on another country. You shoot down their Pentagon. Israel literally launched a missile into the Syrian Pentagon and blew it up in midair. I spoke yesterday with deputy spokesman of the Knesset, and I've been watching, several Israeli politicians, and they've all been saying the same. We're not doing a favor here to the Druze. Yes, we have a blood covenant with them, and we're doing the right thing, the Jewish thing. We're doing the humane thing of protecting our allies and innocent people. But the people who came to slaughter the Druze will tomorrow come to slaughter the Jews and the Christians and the Americans, the Europeans, and anyone, the enemy of the West. Also, the Druze are holding the line, basically, between them and Israel. So Israel know that these are enemies of Israel, and they had to send a very clear message to them. We're not playing games. And I think Israel now is doing something that I haven't done before. We've never seen that before. Israel is starting, post-October 7, Israel is starting to behave like a regional power, which is saying this: we are the ones who make the rules here. You abide by our rules. We're not playing by your rules anymore, you bunch of savages. We dictate. We're the strongest nation in this region. We're the most successful, most humane, most just nation in this region. And we're going to make sure that you abide to our rules. And our standards are this: hands off the minorities, hand off the Jews. I hope they will say hand off the Christians and any minority. And I think that is a beautiful thing to see. I'm not a religious man, but that is, if you ask me, that is to be Or LaGoyim, light to the nations.
Okay, so that I would highly recommend that you go and follow Mansour here on YouTube. He's got his own YouTube channel, and he is putting out some really good stuff. So he's from the village of Majd al-Shams here in Israel. And he's got a lot of family there still to this day. Majd al-Shams, if you remember, is the village that had a Hezbollah rocket land right in the middle of it in a soccer field and kill like 22 kids not long ago. So those Druze are patriotic Israelis. They vote, and that's part of the reason why Benjamin Netanyahu, I think, is wanting to definitely keep them happy. I don't know. I don't think that they're actually part of his coalition to govern, because they span several different political parties. But suffice it to say, Benjamin Netanyahu needs all the votes he can get at this point. So I'm going to play you now what Netanyahu said about this operation yesterday. Take a listen.
We are also operating in Syria today, since the morning. We have a commitment to keep the southwestern Syria area as a demilitarized zone on the Israel border. We will not allow a situation to return where a second Lebanon is established there, and we are also committed to protecting the Druze residents. We are doing this through intensive actions. I hope we won't have to take further action. It greatly depends on what is understood and both done and not done.
Okay, so that's what you would expect him to say, I guess, and makes sense. As Mansour was saying, The Israelis are now starting to act like a regional power, and they are basically showing this entire area, this entire region, that they're done playing. They're not going to play by those old rules anymore. They are going, this is a show of force, a show of strength to all of their adversaries. And they're like, who's next? Well, we're going to talk in just a little bit about who might be next. And you're going to want to hear what I have to say on that for sure. All right, we got 1,500 people watching. Please make sure you hit that like button, everybody. We're putting a lot of work into trying to make these better and make them more informative for you, more condensed, and put up more like special projects for you. So please make sure you're subscribed to the channel as well. But hit that like button. I always need somebody to remind me. And apparently you do too. So now in Suwayda, the Druze, like I said, are now some of them seeking revenge against the Bedouin. And so the Bedouins are packing up and fleeing. Now, there was a statement that was put out by Hikmat al-Hijri, the spiritual leader of the Druze community in Syria, and he addressed that issue, the attacks on the Bedouins, after the ceasefire. And here's what he said to the members of the Druze community: we believe in morality and coexistence, and we're committed to forgiveness despite the painful aggression we've experienced in recent hours. We are not racist. We do not support civil war. This is nothing new, just a reminder of our commitment to the path we must follow toward all segments of society, including the tribes, the Bedouins, and others. Anyone who acts otherwise represents only themselves. We renew our commitment to unity, opposition to civil war, and respectful dialogue without weapons. Well, he's not the only one that's looking for respectful dialogue now. After he just had his palace and his defense ministry blown up, Ahmad al-Sharaa is also striking a pretty conciliatory tone toward the Bedouin. I'm sorry, toward the Druze. And I think I have maybe him in here. I'll have to see if I've got that video. That's from Bat-Yam. Oh, well, before I get to that, let me just show you what was going on along the Syrian border. This is what was happening along the Syrian border. Well, man, the sizing keeps getting off on these things. So that just gives you an idea of what that looked like. I after talking with Mansour, he said, "Hey, I've got people you could interview up there." So we're trying to work out how we can get up there tomorrow and interview those people and not be gone for the entire day, because I've got lots of other stuff to do as well. So we may have some more good information about that by tomorrow's live, which should be about the same time as today's live. Okay, we're going to try to keep them about the same time as much as possible while I'm over here. So suffice it to say, the craziness that's happening in Syria is not quite done yet. It's likely that we're going to see more and worse in one way or another. It's likely we're going to see more or worse at some point in the near future. Now, another place we might see more shenanigans, more strikes, could be Iran, because there was a report in NBC came out with today that said that the newest battle damage assessments on the nuclear sites in Iran that were struck during the Operation Midnight Hammer, that's the one the United States did, dropping 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs on these things. Apparently, it completely destroyed the Fordo site. That one's done. But the other two, Isfahan and Natanz, not so much. As a matter of fact, it turns out that at Natanz, they didn't even use those bunker busters. They only used Tomahawk missiles. And so what is being said in this report is that the Iranians, if they want to, could be enriching uranium at Natanz in a matter of weeks to months instead of being set back years. So all that talk we were hearing from the Pentagon and from the president about that the Iranians' nuclear capabilities were completely obliterated and there was no question about it and it was all finished and that was a perfect strike by the United States. Well, the reality is a little more nuanced than that, to say the least. And there is a significant chance that Israel might decide they need to strike Iran again if they see that Iran is looking to start enriching uranium once again. See, there are tunnels underneath Natanz that are, as I was saying all along, far deeper than even the biggest bunker buster bomb can handle. They can't get to those areas. So they were able to collapse the entrances. And as I said before, all it takes is some heavy machinery and you dig those entrances out and you're back in business. So I don't know that they've dug those out yet. And I still think that the battle damage assessment that is coming out, these are intel agencies putting this out, it might be a little bit premature now because they really don't know until they open up those sites and actually go back into them underground to see what survived and what didn't. But without a doubt, we may be in for more difficulties in the near future in Iran. Now, I want to play for you this quote by al-Sharaa, and I thought I had it loaded, but apparently not. Oh, I know, it's over here. That's why. I was looking in the wrong place. Let's see, is this it? No. This one, no. Well, where in the world? I know I put that out. Okay, well, here's what we'll do. We will play this. This is from the condensed live that I did today. So we're going to just skip through it to the part where al-Sharaa is talking so you can hear what he says.
قصف يا شباب. Bombing,
And watch
guys.
this blow up.
New bombing. New bombing, guys.
That's smaller.
New bombing. The building is completely destroyed.
Ooh, watch
New
the
bombing, guys. Bombing.
roof come
Get us out
right
quickly.
off the
Quickly.
defense ministry building right there.
Hey everybody,
Huge.
Chuck Holton
Okay,
here. This is
so
your
let's skip through here and get to, here it is. Forces would begin withdrawing from Suwayda.
I specifically mention our Druze people who are an integral part of the fabric of this nation. We assure you that protecting your rights and freedom is our priority.
The U.S. state, like I said, very conciliatory tone there. And I guess that's what you would expect because al-Sharaa, being a dictator by default, I mean, you can't really call a guy, you can't say he's not a dictator if he pushed out, he rose up and pushed out the president of the country and then installed himself as the new leader without being elected. This guy is not the president of Syria. He is a known terrorist who spent 6 years in prison being guarded by the United States in Iraq and was a member of al-Qaeda and everything else. You all know all that. So it's pretty clear that this guy is a dictator, but he just had his head handed to him on a platter by the Israelis. And he got the message that they could take him out if they want to. So he's striking a very conciliatory tone toward the Druze, at least, now his tone was not as conciliatory toward the Israelis, and he had, had to thump his chest a little bit in talking with the Israelis. But yeah, he did push out a dictator, but that doesn't mean he's not a dictator. There's no question about that. So today, this morning, I woke up in Tel Aviv with my lovely wife. I'm so glad she's here. And we had a wonderful breakfast by the sea. And the place where our hotel was in Bat Yam. Now, Bat Yam is a suburb of Tel Aviv, right on the water. It's pretty built up. I mean, there's most of the tenements in Bat Yam are high-rise apartment buildings, or at least multi-story apartment buildings. There are, I don't think I saw any actual just single-family homes in Bat Yam. It's a working class community. It was struck with one of the hardest missile strikes. A 2,000-pound warhead struck Bat Yam during the 12-day war. And it didn't strike any military targets. It just landed in the middle of the neighborhood. So I wanted to stop by and go see it this morning as we were leaving to come back to Jerusalem. And I couldn't find it. So I want to show you my search, and then when I actually did find it, what it looked like. Take a listen. So this morning I'm driving through the suburb of Tel Aviv called Bat Yam, and this is one of the places where there was a large missile strike, actually 9 people killed and a bunch more wounded, and 20 buildings are going to have to be demolished because they were damaged so badly. But even in this small suburb of Tel Aviv, I'm having a hard time finding the place where the damage is. I've been driving around the neighborhood trying to find the missile strike, and I can't find it. I mean, if you were coming here and didn't watch the news and didn't know there was a war going on, you'd have no idea from just driving around this neighborhood, even though this is one of the parts of Tel Aviv that was damaged the most severely by the Iranian missile strikes. So it just, again, kind of points out what a lie it was that so many pundits in the United States, like Colonel McGregor and Tucker Carlson, were pushing that Tel Aviv was 1/3 destroyed. So we found the site where the missile landed in Bat Yam. Funny, last night I got within about 400 yards of this place and had no idea it was even here. There was no damage where I was, but it was very hard to find this because it's a neighborhood tucked back in here, and you can see there is a significant amount of damage here in this neighborhood. A lot of windows broken and things like that, but they're already tearing down some of the buildings and starting to repair them. Over here on this side, there were a lot of windows broken out and things like that, but these buildings damaged, but won't need to be condemned probably or destroyed. They'll just be able to fix them up. So 9 people died in this strike. But again, I've driven all around this suburb of Tel Aviv, and it was very difficult to even find the place where the damage was. And so it just hopefully gives you a little better context of how this war has played out. Okay, so that's what it looked like. And believe it or not, there are still people putting out information, especially from the United States, saying that Tel Aviv was 1/3 destroyed, that Oscar has been pulling his hair out today because he's been having debates with some of these people, and they're saying that Haifa was completely wiped out. People are going hungry. There's no electricity in Haifa and things like that. And we just spent the weekend up there over this last weekend, and Haifa's in great shape. We went to the beach. We took a walk. We stayed in a nice hotel. We went out to eat, and we stopped by one of the places where a missile struck Haifa, and a couple people were killed in that area, but I showed you that before. You can go back and watch it if you missed it on some of my previous lives. But there's still electricity. People are going about their business. So I do that, like I said in the video, just to give you some context, because without context, you really can't get a good understanding of what's happening in any conflict or disaster. The news exists to report the out of the ordinary. And so if it's in your hometown and there's a 17 car pileup on the freeway, well, the news reports that you travel that freeway, so you know there's not always a 17 car pileup, and so you have that context to put it in, so you can file that correctly in your brain. But if it's talking about a place that you've never been to, like Afghanistan or Syria or here in Israel, and you don't have somebody on the ground to tell you what's going on, then you don't have any context, and all you hear is the out of the ordinary things that are happening. But for you, in your mind, that becomes the ordinary, and you think that that's all that happens over there. And that's why the tourism sector is hurting so bad here in Israel, because people think, oh my gosh, Israel's at war, I can't go there, we're going to get blown up by a missile. Well, that's very, very unlikely to happen. So if you're disposed to take a trip to Israel, now would be a really good time to do it, because there's no lines at any of the tourist attractions, and you can get good deals on some of the hotels and things like that. So about the only tourists they're seeing now are other Israelis that are going to the Dead Sea or going up to Haifa or something like that. So it's a good time to come. I have a question for you. If you can answer in the chat, how many of you have been to Israel before? So let's ask. Don't answer that. I'm going to have the mods put up a poll and say yes or no. I've been to Israel before. I'd like to know what percentage of my audience has actually visited the land in their life sometime. Okay, so. All right, we're going to keep moving here and move on to Gaza. Okay, now, the big news that's happening this afternoon out of Gaza, and the mainstream media is jumping all over it, is that the only remaining Catholic church in Gaza was struck in an IDF by an IDF tank today. They fired a tank round that hit the church. And if you've seen that reporting from the mainstream media, they make it sound like the church was demolished, like it was just completely blown up. And they even creatively kind of work the angles of the damage on the church to make it look like it's much worse than it really is. So I want to give you some more context on that as well. So first, I'm going to show you the fake news. Okay, this is from Cardinal Pizzabella, who is here in Israel. What we know for sure is that a tank, the IDF says it was by mistake, but we're not sure about this, hit the church directly, the Church of the Holy Family, the Latin Church. Images of the only Catholic church in Gaza before and after today's attack. Okay, so the before picture there on the left is obviously before the war in Gaza started, right? Because everything's clean, everything's nice, there's, it's all swept up and everything like that. Now, in the picture on the right, it looks like the entire church is demolished, and there's just barely, you can see the cross up there just hanging by a thread, and all this destruction over, in this picture here. Okay, so just to show you how important it is, what angle, how a journalist can completely change the tone of a story just by changing the angle of the photograph. Let's take a look at a front-on picture of this church after the strike today. Take a look at this. Here it is. This is the front view. And oh, look, the church isn't destroyed. It sheared off a little corner up there near the top of the roof. Now, apparently, there were a couple people inside the church who were injured by falling debris. Nobody died. One of the people injured was the cardinal that is in charge of the church, and that's extremely unfortunate. For their part, the IDF has said they believe this was a mistake. It was a case of mistaken identity. There was some rumor out that that Hamas had been using the church and that Israel was going after them. But the IDF is opening an investigation into this. And if there were things done incorrectly, then people will be censured or, prosecuted for that. But I just want to point this out. The difference between fake news over here, let's make this bigger so you can see it. The difference between this, oh my goodness, the church was destroyed. Look at that. Oh man, it was terrible. And this, oh, wait a minute. Those were destroyed buildings behind the church that are just in that picture. Okay, that's what we're looking at, right? Now, it's unfortunate that the church was struck at all. I believe this is a church where there were a lot of Christians that have been living there, taking shelter in that church. It has been damaged before because there was a Hamas position right across the street. I don't know if it's the same church or not, but there was another church in Gaza that was damaged in a similar way, but it's called collateral damage. There's people on social media who are saying that's not collateral damage. There were people injured. People get injured in collateral damage. So, look, I don't know what the reality is of whether or not the IDF intended to strike the church or not. I don't know if there was anybody in the church that needed to be struck or if it was just an unfortunate accident. Unfortunate accidents do happen in war zones, so we shouldn't be surprised if it is. But let me just explain. The way that you know which side is the right side in this conflict is when something like this happens, what is done about it? So if Hamas had blown this up, they would have immediately blamed it on Israel and they would have tried to make hay out of it. When it's Israel doing it, Israel says, our bad, we had no intention of striking any religious sites or harming any civilians. That's very important to us, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. And we're going to find out what went wrong and make sure it doesn't happen again. Our condolences to everybody. Nobody died, PC. That is the right way to handle this. So just recall at the beginning of the war, there was a bomb that landed at a hospital, and within 2 minutes of that bomb landing at the hospital, Al Jazeera and the AP and a bunch of mainstream media news outlets were reporting that 500 people were killed when Israel struck this hospital in Gaza. That came out within minutes of the strike. There wasn't even time to count that many bodies before that information came out. Then after a while, and this went out on all the news media. I mean, this went all over the place, right? Worldwide. Israel was roundly condemned up and down, left and right by the UN and everybody, the Biden administration. Everybody came out and said, oh, this is terrible. Israel struck this hospital, killed 500 people. Well, then Israel released video footage that showed that the missile that hit the hospital originated in Gaza. It was fired by the PIJ. And then when people got on the ground and actually started counting the bodies, It turned out like 26 people died, not 500. Thank you, PC. Very kind to you. So this is par for the course. The media is doing everything it can to spin everything that happens in Gaza to be against Israel. And the AP is one of the worst. I mean, the Associated Press is supposed to be like the gold standard of journalism out there, but they are the worst at this. If you go to AP's website, every story about this war has to do with how many children and women died in Gaza today. Every story. I mean, it's unbelievable that just Israel strikes and kills this many children and women. They don't say anything. That you cannot find any reporting from the AP that talks about Israel engaging the enemy, engaging Hamas, and eliminating terrorists in Gaza. Not once. The only thing they talk about is civilians dying. And a lot of times they're getting their information from the Gaza Health Ministry, which we know is an arm of Hamas. So, it's just unbelievable to me that they have any credibility left whatsoever. And it's no wonder more and more people are coming to platforms like this one to get their news from people who are on the ground here, like me and Oscar Ramirez. Okay. So, we got lots of angry people honking down here. Yeah, just mind-boggling how that works. Thank you, Fletch. The fact that they quote Hamas figures as a fact says is all. Yeah, that's right. That tells you everything you need to know right there, doesn't it? Now, we just got word going back up to Syria that supporters of the Syrian regime, not official regime forces, just average run-of-the-mill Sunnis who support al-Sharaa, are coming from various regions across Syria and organizing, mobilizing to go and support the Bedouins against the Druze. So it sounds like it's going to be, there's Beeper Guy. No, that's not the actual Beeper Guy. Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah, actual Beeper Guy backing up down there. That never fails. Isn't that amazing? Every single night for almost 2 years, this guy has backed across the parking lot, and literally, we got to make a T-shirt out of this. I mean, it's crazy how I love it. So it's very likely we're going to see more violence between the Druze and the not Druze, the Sunnis, Bedouins, whatever. Even if al-Sharaa doesn't let his forces have anything to do with it. The problem al-Sharaa has is that he doesn't have control over his own people. It's just it's just a fact. Now the the Druze leaders in Syria are calling for a humanitarian corridor. Today they changed their tune just a little bit and said, we don't just want a humanitarian corridor from Sweida to the Israeli border. We want one from the Israeli border all the way to the Kurdish-controlled territory on the other side of the Euphrates River. That would be ideal. Let me just say, that would be really, really good. Now, for their part, the IDF has said, we will not allow any military activity, none, zero, no military activity south of Damascus. So if we see fighting happening down there, we're going to put a stop to it, because that is our buffer now, and it's going to remain our buffer for the indefinite future. So if there is more fighting down there between the Sunnis and the Druze, Israel's going to have a hard time trying to figure out who's who, because one of the things, you can't just look from an airplane that's traveling at Mach 2 and say, oh, there's the good guys and there's the bad guys, so I need to shoot at the bad guys over here. No, you can't hardly see anything from up there. You need somebody on the ground to be designating targets for you. Now, it is possible that the Israelis have some, forward observers inside Syria. It's not just possible, it's highly likely. And those forward observers, that's their job, is to call in fire and say, okay, here's what needs to be blown up and here's what doesn't. And here's how to, tell them apart. They can use different things like colored smoke. They can use infrared lasers, lots of different ways to designate targets to the aircraft. But this might actually end up being, hey, the Israelis are going to have to send ground troops into Syria to go fight on behalf of the Druze. And if they don't, then the Druze from Israel are going to go do it themselves. That's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point. Okay, now I just wanted to point out our poll here shows that about 75% of you had never been to Israel, which is crazy. Now, I should do another tour to Israel, but Connie and I have already decided we're not doing any more tours to Israel. There's lots of tour companies that will bring you on a tour over here. If you want to come on a tour to Israel, you can do that. I don't want to be responsible for 40 people for 10 days in Israel again. That was way more stress than I need. And why it was so much more stressful to do it in Israel than it is to do it every year in Armenia, I'm not exactly sure, except for if you're dealing with Arabs, they're going to try to take advantage of you. And the Israelis were no picnic to work with business-wise either, in terms of the hotels that we stayed in and things like that. It was just very challenging, and it was still stressful because there was still air raids, and we had a missile attack from Iran and all this stuff that happened during our time. So that was a one reason why we don't want to do those again. But I would recommend that you go. I know it's expensive, but it's a once in a lifetime thing. Save up money, make it a priority, and just pretty much anybody could do it. I know lots of poor people that have made it to Israel because they wanted to. Okay, apparently there's more fighting breaking out between the Bedouins and the Druze in the northern part of Suwayda. This is just coming out just a few minutes ago. And there's some video I can put up over at chuckholton.com. There's a lot of video coming out of this stuff, and it is extremely graphic. You saw that video of them shaving that guy's beard. Now, why do they do that? Well, for the Druze, that's a real humiliation for a grown man not to have a beard. It's almost like, marking him and saying, I'm gay and I'm here to take your guns, and then dropping him in, Earp, Texas at, 2 o'clock in the morning after the bars let out or something. I mean, it's a really, something that's not done. Adult Druze males have facial hair, and if the facial hair is cut off, it's a real disgrace to them, which is, sounds like the Old Testament to me, really. So there again, more fighting taking place. There's a lot of atrocities happening. The videos coming out of those atrocities are horrific. I obviously cannot show them to you here on YouTube. And so that's why we have chuckholton.com. If you go over to chuckholton.com, I can post things over there that would get me banned from YouTube. And so we label, if it's graphic, we label it as such, and we make it behind the paywall. So you got to be a supporter to be able to see it. But we do put extra content over there on a regular basis. And I would highly recommend that you go and become a supporter if you want to support the work that I'm doing. If you like these reports, you want to keep watching them, then please go to chuckholton.com and become a supporter over there. All right, we're going to go to our questions now. Benjamin Nisham says, Is there a realistic prospect of Netanyahu enticing parties into government in place of the ones that left to avoid the need for an election at such a time of national crisis? It's going to be difficult for him to do. He may have to do it. He may be forced to. But so far, he's hanging on by a thread. So far, he doesn't have to do that. Will Trump condemn al-Jilani? Well, Marco Rubio hasn't condemned al-Jilani. They've just stuck to their talking points of, we just want the killing to end. And as I said last night, when you talk that way, what you really, it's a cowardly position to take. We want the killing to end. Just end the killing and we'll be happy. Well, there are two ways to end the killing. You can let the bad guys take over and take control, and then they can do whatever they want, or you can defeat the bad guys and bring it lasting peace. So just saying we want the killing to stop is a very cowardly position to take. And I would love to see the president take a firm stand and say, that is wrong and it shouldn't happen. And we're going to support anybody who is going to do something about it. And I'm not saying we need to send troops to Syria. We have a few left there, although they've been pulling out over the last few days. We've abandoned 2 more bases in Rojava, which is the Kurdish-held part of Syria, and that doesn't bode well for the Kurds. The Kurds are watching what's happening between the Druze and the Bedouins with great interest, and they're very concerned about this because they could be next. And if the Sunnis manage to take over Sweida and submit the Druze, then it's a very good chance they're going to be setting their sights over on the Kurds. Now, the Kurds have their own problems with the Turks, and I want to talk more about them in just a second. Why doesn't the IDF arm the Druze and help them in the war? They may be arming the Druze. Will America step in? I highly doubt it. How likely is it that the hostilities between Bedouin and Druze in Syria might spill over into open conflict between these two groups within Israel? I don't think that's going to be a problem. That's a very good question, Denise. Could this, happen? Could this spill over? Oh, sorry, that wasn't Denise. Kind of deleted the question while I was still answering it. It very well could. I don't know. I haven't heard any rumblings about any, problems between Israeli Bedouins and Israeli Druze right now. And let's hope it stays that way. Che asks, do you think Turkey will get involved in Syria? They're buddies of al-Sharaa and the Syrian regime. Are they fighting over there? Well, that is a major concern now because Israel has pretty much put the shellacking to all of their adversaries except Turkey. And if Israel has to go to war with Turkey, that's going to be really, really bad for a lot of reasons. First of all, Turkey has a much bigger military than even Iran. I'm sorry, not bigger in terms of people, but bigger in terms of equipment, much more high tech. Their military budget is almost twice what Iran's military budget has been. So they have a stronger economy in Turkey, so they can absorb the shocks of war more easily than Iran could. And if Turkey decides to go to war with Israel, they've got almost 300 F-16s and a whole bunch of Bayraktar drones that could be flying over Israel, and they're near peer competitors to the F-16. I think it's I model that Israel has. Israel's are a little more high tech than Turkey's are, so they would have the advantage there. But almost 300 of them is not a drop in the bucket. That's a lot. Now, of course, Israel's got F-35s and things like that could be a problem. Turkey, though, has a much. Here's one likely scenario that could happen. Turkey starts pushing troops into Syria, saying we're not going to allow al-Sharaa regime to be struck by Israel. Now, they already tried to do that, and Israel struck the bases that Turkey was trying to occupy in Syria. And Israel made it clear to Turkey, we're not going to let you have troops in Syria. But there are Turkish troops in Syria up in the north still. But if they start pushing further south, Israel's going to have a problem with that. Now, then you get into the whole geopolitical aspect of the fact that Turkey is a NATO ally of the United States and Israel is an ally of the United States. If push comes to shove, the U.S. is going to side with Israel on that, no doubt, because we're kind of salty with Turkey anyway, since they were, they came to NATO as a staunch ally, and then Erdogan got elected. He's full-on Muslim Brotherhood, Sunni extremist, supported ISIS with money and weapons and things like that. So that's not neighborly when you're a NATO ally. So the United States would side with Israel almost without a doubt, but they would put a lot of pressure on that, because you could see Turkey pushing hundreds of thousands of troops into Syria. Israel has troops in Syria already. Israel would have to move troops in there as well. Then you're talking about a real live on the ground conflict, conventional battle between Israel and Turkey. That could be super, super bad. A lot of casualties on both sides, and the people of Syria stuck in the middle. Let's pray that doesn't happen. But there is, I was talking to Siri about this, because again, I'm not Siri. I was talking to ChatGPT about this, because I'm not super expert on biblical end times prophecy. But a lot of people have asked about the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. That's called the Gog and Magog war. And that's the most commonly cited passage that's used in discussions about whether Israel is going to get attacked by a northern coalition of nations. Ezekiel 38:2 says, "Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, prophesy against him." So the traditional interpretation of that is that Gog is a symbolic or literal leader of an anti-Israel coalition. Magog, Meshech, and Tubal are ancient regions that are often associated with areas in modern-day Turkey, Russia, or Central Asia. So countries commonly identified as that Magog could be Russia, and Turkey could be part of that, because Ezekiel 38:6 references Gomer and Beth Togarmah. That's also linked by many to Turkey. So the coalition could be Iran, Kush, which is Sudan, Ethiopia, Put, which is Libya, Gomer, which is Western Turkey, and Beth Togarmah, which is Eastern Turkey. So while not naming Turkey explicitly in Ezekiel, because that nation didn't exist in biblical times, there are many prophecy interpreters see multiple regions within modern day Turkey named in the list of attackers and say this war could actually happen, and it could happen the way I just described to you. So, at the rate things are going, could happen day after tomorrow. I mean, we could be right there, and that's obviously concerning. Now, some people just see that as a symbolic prophecy. Gog and Magog are representative of evil forces that are aligned against God people, not a literal war that involves today's nations. I don't know. I don't know which way is correct, but I'm just giving you that to try to answer your question. So that was a long answer to a short question. Denise says, why can't Druze in Syria declare independence and merge with Israel? They have talked about it, and Israel would have to agree to that. I think a lot of countries around the world would refuse to recognize that if it happened. Why can't they just be left alone to live in peace? I'll take that as a rhetorical question, Lori. The Bedouin are attacking the Druze. Again, I heard not the other way around. Connie, could you avoid deleting those until, because it's making it hard for me to read them. They keep popping up on me. So just leave them there and I'll just go down the list. Okay, Stephanie, you missed part of the live where I was talking about that the Bedouin are starting to take revenge against, I'm sorry, the Druze are starting to take revenge against the Bedouin. The Bedouin were attacking the Druze, and now the Druze are attacking back. Some of them are calling for calm. Let's hope that they get that. Nicholas Dupree says, why is this ongoing conflict being almost completely ignored in the mainstream media? Difficult to answer that, except that it's hard to get journalists into Syria. I was just there in March, and I could go into the areas that are controlled by the Kurds, but could not get across the Euphrates River into the areas that were controlled by HTS. That would have been a death sentence for me. So Western media, now, of course, Al Jazeera is all over that, and they're in there, but big mainstream media outlets just can't get people in there, really. Is it just a coincidence, Trey asks, that since October 7th, Israel has bombed every Shiite country in the Middle East, but not one Sunni country? I think that is something of a coincidence. They're not looking at Sunni Shia so much as they are whether or not they're a threat to. I mean, I think you could make I guess a connection there by saying that Shiite countries are much more likely to be belligerent against Israel than Sunni countries. Okay, the Kurds are Sunni; they're not, in any way wanting to be belligerent toward Israel, etc. So I guess there is some connection there, just because not because Israel is only looking and saying, "Oh, we want to wipe out the Shiite countries," but because the Shiites are the ones who are attacking Israel. Okay. Stephanie asks, do you think Turkey or Qatar or someone else was involved in this latest massacre because of the normalization talks with Syria? Could Turkey have saboteurs or aegis provocateurs in Syria already? It's virtually guaranteed that they do. So could they be whipping up the fervor against Israel? It's very possible. And I guess, going back to that previous question that Trey asked, they did attack Turkey in Syria. So they did attack some Sunnis who were in Syria. Okay, Rev Renz asks, why doesn't Israel just drop some troops there in Iran to make an assessment on nuclear sites? Iran has 600,000 troops in their military still, and they don't have the ability to leave Iran much. But inside Iran, Israel would have a hard time establishing and maintaining a secure perimeter while I mean, that would cause the deaths of a lot of people and maybe a lot of Israelis if they did that. But I don't think they need to airdrop troops in there because they've got Mossad agents in there already. And it's pretty much guaranteed that there have been Mossad agents all over those sites that's part of what's bringing out the intel that we're hearing from those sites, okay? Are Bedouins enemies of Druze? Who are the Bedouins? Bedouins are nomadic people that live across the Middle East. They're kind of like gypsies in a way. They here in Israel, they're kind, loyal people. They serve in the military. They serve in the government. But they tend to be more nomadic. They like to kind of do their own thing. They're an ethnic group where the Druze are kind of an ethno-religious group, and they have different belief systems. Bedouins are primarily Sunni Muslim, I believe. Sean Howard says, could the ultra-Orthodox conscripted who fired the ordnance at the church? Wow, good question, Sean. I have not heard which country, or I'm sorry, which unit it was that fired at the church, but I don't think it was an ultra-Orthodox unit. And so I don't think they'd be stupid enough to intentionally shoot at the church, because they would have to know that's going to get somebody in trouble. I mean, unless they're just absolute idiots, which, there's a possibility of that. How much did it cost for two people to go to Israel? I think you could come here for a week for probably a couple $1,000 on the ground costs, depending on where you stay and where you go, and how high on the hog you want to live. Airfare is going to be another big cost, and from the U.S., airfare can cost between $1,200 and $2,000 or more, depending on how comfortable you want to be on the ride over here. Background of Bedouins, former ISIS? No, but Bedouins, like I said, especially in Syria, tend to be Sunni, and ISIS is Sunni, so there are Bedouins who joined ISIS for sure. Stephanie asked, do you think the attacks were ordered to disrupt the normalization talks from a few days ago in Turkey and Qatar? No, I don't think so. I think there was a catalyzing event between the Druze and the Bedouins that kicked all this off, and then it just got out of hand. What's Mansour's last name? It's Ashkar, Ashkar, Mansour Ashkar, and we will put in the show notes Mansour's. Matter of fact, maybe one of the mods can go find the handle for his YouTube, or the link to his YouTube channel, and post it in the chat. But we'll also post it in the show notes after we get finished with the show. Rich, thank you very much for the donation. I really appreciate all your donations. We make good use of them. We have a lot of people we're helping around the globe, and you guys allow us to help a lot of people with your contributions. So thank you very much for doing that. Last question. Do you think that Israel striking Damascus is leading to Damascus becoming a ruinous heap? No. Damascus is a big city. Israel struck very precisely at a few buildings. So I know what you're getting at, the Bible talking about Damascus becoming a ruinous heap. So far, that has not happened. But if Turkey comes down and goes to land war with Israel in Damascus, it will become a ruinous heap in very short order. So that's a serious possibility. I don't think it's a probability, but it is a possibility. Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you to all of you who contributed. Thank you to all of you for hitting the like button, going to chuckholton.com, becoming supporters over there. That's the better place to be a supporter, because it helps to future-proof the channel against whatever vagaries we run into of YouTube. They have been known to just cut people off for no reason. If that ever happens, then we'll be up and running over on chuckholton.com, and you can come over there. But if you go over there now, you can become a supporter, get lots of extra content, and keep us out here working. So thank you very much to do that. Also, don't forget to visit our sponsor at Beam. There's a Rubina just put the link up, shopbeam.com/quartering, and use code HOTZONE and get 35% off of your order. And I have tried these hot chocolate drinks made from mushrooms and theanine and that kind of stuff, and they do work. So I recommend you check them out as well if you have trouble sleeping. All right. Thank you very much for watching. I'm going to